Hello everyone, my name's Mathew Pollard and I'm the author of the best-selling Introvert's Edge series. And in today's interview that I'm doing with Dov Baron, we are going to discuss the underestimated, the often neglected, forgotten members of your team, the introverts, the people that often you don't get to speak up, wish they spoke up more, and in truth, it's your fault. Let's discuss why and what you can do about it. Cheers.
Welcome back to our delicious conversation with Mathew Pollard. Forbes called Mathew the real deal. He's the best-selling author of The Introvert's Edge, and now his new book is The Introvert's Edge for Networking. These are books that have done super well. Mathew himself is in the top 30 sales professionals, global gurus. He's made it top sales magazine. He's done extremely well. He speaks all over the world. And yes, he's an introvert. And we've been speaking about what the misconceptions are about introversy and how really damaging it is to us, because as leaders, we know that to replace anybody on your team is 1.5 to 2 times the annual salary of that individual. That means if that person is an $80,000 person, it's costing you about 120 to 160 grand to replace them. And what if you're replacing somebody who's doing the work of 2 people who's quietly working away in the background, but they just left because you didn't recognize them? So in this part of the show, we want to talk about those 2 things. So let's talk about, first of all, what can we as leaders do to really recognize this hidden talent, this gold mine of talent that is in our midst, but really not speaking up? Can you guide us a little bit on this, Mathew, for our leaders? So somebody who's in a very senior position who's looking and thinking, I think there's something there in Charlie and Susan, but I don't know. They never say much. So I kind of think that they're a sleeping giant, but maybe they're just not interested. Because I think a lot of time that introverted person comes across as not interested.
Yeah, I think so what's really interesting there is, a lot of times the senior leaders don't even recognize or know those people's names. So I think we're already dealing with somebody that's a little bit more advanced. I mean, the problem that we really have is, you're right, they're like, Sarah or Johnny, they're just not engaged. And, I notice they come to meetings and they don't say much. And quite frequently, a leader might notice that they say, John, you always have great ideas after the fact. Why don't you share your opinion now? And John's like, oh, well, I've got nothing to say at this point. Well, that's just lazy leadership. I mean, in truth, you should have brought up that you were going to have a meeting and what the agenda was going to be before you had the meeting, so that Johnny could have thought about his ideas. And if you mentioned you were going to ask for people's opinions at these points, well, then you would have got some really great ideas. But truthfully, it's about first understanding that you have introverts and helping them realize that they don't need to be ashamed of that. Because if you say, hey, I just wanted to ask you, Sarah, do you feel like you're an introvert? Oh gosh, no, I'm not an introvert. Please don't fire me, right? That's the response you're going to get. So you have to first educate them that being an introvert is okay. It's just where you draw your energy. Then bringing them to understand that there are systems and processes that for them to naturally learn how to be skilled at all of these so-called extroverted arenas.
Right, so there's an interesting point there, and that is this, that from a psychology point of view, what most people don't realize is it's actually a brain function, but the way that introverts process is different than the way extroverts process. So introverts process deeper and slower, and their reference points take longer to get to. It's not a bad thing. In fact, usually the answer you'll get from an introverted individual has greater depth to it. So you may get more ideas from an extrovert initially, but the depth of those ideas, the impact, and you might even see that introvert as being a bit pessimistic because they've thought about some of the problems with this idea that everybody was rah about in the first 5 minutes. And I know, because we were dealing with a team in Europe, and there was one of the guys on the team, and I could see they were ready to get rid of him. And I stopped and said, I can see what's going on here. Do you realize that his ideas run deeper than yours? No. I said, no, hold on. You're missing him. You're missing, his name is Andrew. You're missing what Andrew's got, because he was an Aussie actually. And you're missing what Andrew's got, because I said, tell me what happens when you put all the things on every, you say, well, give me ideas, and people give ideas, and then you sign off on it, right? This is what I'm saying to the CEO. And he goes, yeah, we have a consensus, you sign off on it. And I go, what happens with Andrew? And he goes, 2-3 days later, he comes back with another idea, and we've already started. And I go, that's the problem.
Yeah. And
if you want him to sign off on the day, you've got to give him 2 or 3 days to think about it, because he's a slow muller. He's going to mull it and go deep on it. And this is where I think that we in leadership can really miss out on that value. So I really appreciate you bringing that forward, this understanding that there's going to be more value in a different way, not in a better way, but a different way.
If I can make one more point on that, I think that what happens is a lot of leaders get frustrated with that person, because they're like, well, I've just signed off and now this is a great idea. Why didn't you bring it up in the meeting? Like, now I know that I've implemented a lesser idea and I'm forever going to know that. So they take it as a point of frustration, where if they had have set the agenda up front, if they had have highlighted that there were going to be some questions asked, then that introvert would have brought up that wonderful idea, the risks. They would have really thought about it, because the truth is the extrovert's going to comment in the meeting. They're never going to think about it again, where the introvert will spend 3, 4, 5 days mulling over the idea, and they will give you this really thought out concept. One of the things that you'll find with introverts, especially when it comes to sales, networking, public speaking, is that if they get the opportunity to plan, they'll go through and, one of the big things for introverts is learning how to plan their remarks, learning how to structure what they say. And the reason why they do better at those activities is because they've planned, they've prepared, which means they can then present the best version of themselves. But if you're talking about topics that are outside their zone of genius or requiring synthesis with their zone of genius, that has to take time, but you will benefit every single time if you give advance notice of that synthesis, because they're really going to consider all of the elements and then bring to you a well thought out plan.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And it's an important point. Now you've written this second book, which is about networking. And if I know, because I get to meet lots of these people, most people, even extroverts, hate networking meetings. They're just crap, because people wandering around the room handing you business cards, and certainly it's painful for an introvert, and for an extrovert it feels like a waste of time. It's painful for the introvert because I can't do it the way they can do it. Look at Charlie; he's wandering around and saying hello to everybody, but Charlie leaves the meeting and goes, "Well, that was a waste of time." So there's effective networking, which is a separate idea altogether. But you've written this book about networking, particularly for introverts. And first of all, I want to know why you chose to write that book, because you've done your first one in helping people to get out there and be in sales and such. But why the networking book? Is it because it's such a major hurdle?
Yeah, so I mean, the first book did amazingly well. I mean, as you said, it did 55,000 copies. It's been translated into 15 languages now. And to be honest, I mean, with my reading issues, I really didn't want to write a second book. And,
I understand.
So for me, I mean, writing a chapter of the book is working with my ghostwriter. He'll write words. I'll then write 3,000 words of notes after listening to it with a robot voice. And then that'll go up and back forever. So writing another book, was maybe in a few years. But what actually happened is I had this, it was a small business owner out of Buffalo, New York, who sent me this story about his son. And his son had discovered the sales book on the coffee table, and he'd always been interested in Dad's business books. And literally, he picked it up and he read it cover to cover in one sitting. And then he carried it with him to school. If you can imagine a kid walking around high school with this book, but he decided that if
he might get the label nerd.
Perhaps. But what was interesting is that he realized that if I could systemize a sale, maybe he could systemize the process of making friends. Now, I mean, this is a kid that never looked at people in the eyes. He looked at his shoes, he had the hoodie over his head, and he never engaged in social interaction. Within weeks, the hoodie was off. He started to engage with the popular kids, and there was a girl in the picture. right? His life transformed. So in the next book, we actually share that story in the first chapter. But we talk about the reason why I decided it was important is, firstly, I mean, let's face it, sales is important. If you think you're not in sales and you run your own business, I mean, the truth is you're in sales, right? If you're not selling your wares, and you've got to learn a comfortable way to do that if you're an introvert. But in truth, when you go for an interview, you're in sales. But what I found is most introverts, they went, well, okay, now I've learned this and I can apply it to interviewing, I can apply it to sales, but how do I get to have those conversations? How do I get in front of that right employer? Even if it's internally in an organization, you know, how do I get in front of that leader? And I went, you know what? I need to map out the exact strategies that work for introverts to do that, because people just don't realize they can plan and prepare. I mean, a great example of this is I went and spoke at an event at Intel. And, you know, I delivered this presentation, and afterwards I had this guy, he was staying at the same hotel as me, and he met me downstairs. We just walked into each other, and we had like a 30-minute conversation. And he started to say he explained that he was an introvert. He said, but it's easy for me to talk to you because, you know, I saw you speak, so I can talk about it with context. And I said, what, you didn't know anyone that was coming? Did Intel not send a list of all the executives that were going to be at this global retreat? Did people not come to this every year that are all part? I mean, Intel, most people have worked there for 20, 25 years. He said, I mean, yeah. I said, well, why didn't you look them all up on LinkedIn, work out who you wanted to talk to, connect with them beforehand, let them know why, look at what they're sharing on social media. Now you've got context. You can have a planned conversation rather than what a lot of extroverts do, that scattergun transactional networking, or what introverts do, the aimless networking, where we kind of have all these shallow conversations. You can be very strategic and you can have detailed dialogue about things that are relevant to you. To him, that was mind-blowing. And I'm like, how is it in today's digital age that people aren't seeing these things? Well, the truth is, people don't plan what they're going to say. People don't do any research about the events they're going to. Even in a corporate event where the same people go every year, they don't do any due diligence, but they're hoping to run into somebody that can promote them. It makes no sense to me. So I mapped out exactly the steps that I followed to go from coming to the US and not knowing a soul to being one of the most networked people in the city within a year, and then to be, well, actually Global Gurus just listed me as the #3 sales professional, and that would not have happened unless I had this social capital of people that supported me that I didn't have when I got here.
Right. So let's just look at that for a minute in a very practical sense. And I want to go to two things. In a practical sense, what can a leader do to create an environment that is introvert friendly, that allows for those introverts to step forward? Because this whole idea of open door policy, I've said for years, it's a complete waste of time, and it wastes everybody's time. Most people are not going to walk through that door because there is a force field there. It's called the hierarchy of power. And the only people who are ever going to walk through it are extremely confident, very accomplished, and probably extroverted. Your introverts never come through the door. So that's number one. So it's a complete waste of time. You've got to go out and meet them, is what I say. Now, the challenge with that is that it's also terrible, because if the door's open, people are interrupting you. And it's not the people you actually want to interrupt you. So walk us through, from a leader position, how they can create a more introvert friendly place in a very practical way to sort of source that gold mine.
Absolutely. So, I mean, firstly, this is even more important now when so many people are now working virtually. I mean, even after COVID, people are now staying working from home. So if you don't have a plan for having dialogues with your introverts, you go a year and you're like, I have not heard from Matt. Like, what is he doing? So it's actually twofold. You have to help educate your introverted teammates how to talk to you as well. But let's take it in steps. Step one in my mindset is helping people realize that introversion or extroversion, they both have their disadvantages.
Yes.
Now, then creating a training and development plan for both groups based on the career trajectory they say that they want. And what I mean by that is, if you ask an introvert, that's working quietly in your office what career trajectory they want. They're going to tell you some quiet data entry position potentially. I was going to be very happy being a data entry person my entire life because I didn't know that success in something else was possible for me. So because of that, what I needed at that point, well, that I didn't get but fell into, was somebody telling me that if I want to be in data entry, if I want to be a coder, if I want to be a writer, if I want to do any form of quiet job, there is nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, the businesses just don't run without those. However, I do not want you to assume that you can't do these things. So if you want to be a leader, if you want to be a salesperson, if you want to, speak at events on behalf of our organization, I want you to know as an introvert, that's not a barrier for you. The skill sets that you need are just different. Once you start to identify that, you'll start to get real understandings of people that want to have different career trajectories. And you'll be blown away at how many of these introverts will say, actually, I'd like to be more in sales, or I'd like to be given more of a leadership position. I know I've showed no interest in that till now because I didn't know that that was possible for me. But now I know I want to learn those skills. However, you then need to map them with training. And that could be online training, books and resources. The truth is, there's not many books with the word introvert on them, but there are introverts that have been writing books since the dawn of time. So, you can look for books, but you have to help them realize that that person is or was an introvert so that they can believe that those skills and strategies will help. And I think what's made my book so powerful is I said, firstly, don't say, poor you, you're an introvert. Let's try and survive in an extroverted world. I believe it's an introverted world. We've just been sold a lie. So now the first chapters of every one of my books inspire you to realize that in the sales field, the networking field, and then gives you a mapped out strategy. Now, a lot of these things you can find in other books. It's the way I put it together, specifically designed for introverts, while sharing stories of how it was applied by introverts to feel authentic and congruent, that makes my books really different. Now, if you can't find a book in the genre with the word introvert to give to your staff members, look up introverted speakers, introverted presenters, whatever the word is with the word introvert. I mean, I just typed in Ivan Meisner because he's the most well-known networking person, started BNI, and the word introvert, and the blog post came up, oh my gosh, I'm an introvert. And he talks about his story of how his wife diagnosed him at later age. You will be able to find the resources, but it's your job as leaders to get it in front of them and then make sure you create a management plan for them to A, learn those skill sets, but then B, share their ideas and their talents. Now, that doesn't mean it's all on the leader. You should also educate the staff member how to do certain things. We can talk about that if you like, but it is a lot on the leader to start the initial path.
Well, as you said, there are very many famous introverts who we wouldn't think of as introverted, but they created some form of system for themselves that allow them to do it. And as leaders, we also have to let our people know that we will support them in potentially fulfilling what the system is or developing a system for them. I can think, and it's interesting, when you talk about Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, incredibly introverted guy, like seriously introverted guy. And some of them have learned the skills that look like extroverts, like Zig Ziglar did, like you do. But it's not the same as being one. But you can learn the skills if it's something you desire. And I love what you said, Mathew, which is many of the people who want to do the thing have shown no interest yet, because it's what we talked about right at the beginning of the show, is they're carrying a belief system that says that's not possible for me. Like, knocking on a door and making a sale. Oh, well, see, this is just evidence I can't do this. Right. And so they walk away. This is really important for us as leaders to say, here's the system we're offering.
Absolutely.
If you look at companies and you were to say, all right, so now here you are, and we want to do this in two practical ways. So here you are, you're a leader at whatever level inside of the organization. We want to give them a practical thing they can do starting immediately to begin to elicit the gold that's there in their workforce, and also a practical skill for the introvert to step into that, because there's going to be hesitance on both ways. If I'm an extroverted leader, I don't really know what to do. If I'm an introverted person who would like to learn some of these skills, I don't know how to ask. So can you give us just a bit of practicality on both of those sides?
Yeah, so the first thing is to own that you just realized that you've been making a big error, right? So, I mean, staff members, especially the people that feel disenfranchised, are really going to appreciate that. But the truth is, most leaders lean into their extroverted team members, which actually isn't a positive, because that then gets them to listen less, be less empathetic. And those are skill sets that they need to learn. And leaders that recognize that should be spending more time saying, well, actually listen to everyone else first, and then we'll take in your idea. So from a leadership perspective, understanding that you have extroverts that need skill sets too is important, but owning it and saying, I've just watched a podcast or listened to a podcast that helped me realize that introverts and extroverts, neither of them are second-class citizens. Their path to success is just different. Mm-hmm. And because of that, what I've decided is that for extroverts that may not need to be great at active listening and empathy, I'm going to start to do this. And for introverts, I've decided that the first thing I need to do is empower you all that there are some amazing introverts. And what my biggest concern or my biggest worry is that I might have a Zig Ziglar, an Ivan Meisner, a Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg hidden inside my organization that I am not tapping into. And that is an expensive mistake for me. And I am sorry, and that is going to stop today. So what I'm going to do is have a meeting with everybody to first determine where you draw your energy and explain that it's about where they draw their energy, and then create a plan to tap into your unique skill. Now, for the staff members, what I want you to do, and I'll explain what I would say if I was a manager, what I want you to do is realize that while up until now, it was probably my fault that you weren't sharing the great ideas with me. Because if I didn't share with you that you could succeed, I mean, who's going to run a marathon if you don't think you're going to finish, right? But as of today, it's also on you to share your ideas. So what I want you to do is when you have a creative idea, if you want to get on my schedule, here's how you do it. If you don't have to walk into my door, you don't have to be the loudest, I want you to do this. If there are specific things that I can do to make sure meetings work more effectively, here's the suggestion box. By doing that, what you'll find is the introverts will feel empowered, but you have to apologize, because in truth, in all forms of inclusiveness, which introversion is definitely one of them, you have to start by highlighting that the problem was not just them. They're not the issue. It's the way that we included them that was the problem.
Yeah, that's great. That's great input. Well, we're already at the end of part 2 of the show. It's been a pleasure and an honor. I really want to thank you, Mathew, for all that you've shared. I think it's maybe potentially, hopefully, turned on some lights, woke some people up on both sides of this equation. So as we finish, I would love for you to share with our audience where they can find out more about you and all your wonderful resources, your website, your social media, etc. And of course, we'll share all of that in the show notes.
Absolutely. So I would recommend that everyone checks out, my social profiles. We put a ton of free videos out there. And, if you've got an introverted staff member, there's a lot there that will really empower them to realize they're not second-class citizens. But then share with them, the free chapters of either of my books. TheIntrovertsEdge.com will give you my sales book. TheIntrovertsEdge.com/networking will give you the first free chapter of my networking book. And if they just read that chapter, forgetting about networking or forgetting about sales, they'll realize that they're not second-class citizens. And that will really help you get them to take that leap forward of sharing with you what they actually aspire to be, so they don't go work for someone else, but they stay working for you, and they do it in a much more exceptional way.
Fabulous. Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure and an honor. And for you, dear listener, remember, you can go and have a conversation with other conscious leaders, chat about this episode or any of our past episodes by going into our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just simply go to Leadership and Loyalty Podcast inside of those platforms, and you can chat about this show. The truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter how successful you are. If your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're only working at a fraction of your true capability. To find out more about how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or leadership strategist for yourself or your organization, go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. Because unified, actualized meaning is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness in all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about the goldmine of introverts you have inside of your organization that you just haven't seen yet. And also, as an introvert, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about what you're truly capable of beyond those terrible labels that you may be carrying around. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.